Before we talk about the web itself, let's get one important thing straight, that the internet is not the same thing as the web, because a lot of people think that they're the same thing, but they're not. The internet is a global system of interconnected computer networks, and the web, short for World Wide Web, is just one of the services that runs on the internet. So email, video calls, file transfers, those are also internet services. But the web, with websites and links and web browsers, is just one part. And we can use the old metaphor that the internet is like a superhighway. And that would mean that the World Wide Web is just one of the destinations you can reach using that highway. So where did this internet thing come from? Because the internet's origins go back to a project called ARPANET, which stood for the Advanced Research Projects Agency Network, which was a US government-funded project back in the 1960s, which originally intended to connect research computers from different universities and labs. And it was backed by the US Department of Defense. And part of the folklore was that the network was designed to be resilient, even to survive a nuclear attack, which is a bit of a stretch, but the network was decentralized and really, really robust. So ARPANET was just the beginning, and it was still just one network. And other networks started popping up, and researchers wanted to connect those networks together too. So that's where we needed a common language for communication between those networks. So as ARPANET grew, there needed to be a standard way for computers to talk to each other. And that's where TCP/IP comes in, which stands for Transmission Control Protocol/Internet Protocol. And these are two separate things that work together. So the TCP part is like writing a long message and then breaking it into smaller chunks and putting each chunk into its own envelope. So TCP makes sure that every envelope gets to its right destination and gets received and reassembled in the right order. So then the other part, the IP, is like the address written on each envelope. It tells the network where each envelope, called a packet, should go and where it came from. So together they make sure that the data, like an email or a web page, gets from one computer to another reliably. So TCP/IP became the official standard on January 1st, 1983. And by the way, remember that this is still long before the invention of the World Wide Web in 1989. Because back on that day, in 1983, ARPANET and all the growing networks switched to using the TCP/IP protocol. And from there, we stopped thinking in terms of one network and started talking about the inter-networks. And that's where the name Internet came from. The term Internet caught on quickly, and by the late 1980s, ARPANET itself was decommissioned. And the Internet, all built on TCP/IP, kept growing. So even though ARPANET started it all, it was the shift to TCP/IP that created the Internet as we know it today. And by the way, one of the key figures behind the creation of TCP/IP was someone by the name of Vint Cerf, because he co-designed the protocol way back in the 1970s. So Vint Cerf has been often called one of the fathers of the internet. And fun fact, Vint Cerf visited RIT back in 2015 during one of our Brick City homecomings. And also, some people say that the architect character from the Matrix movies was modeled after him. So anyway, let's move on, because we have the internet, still not the web, and a lot of people started using it. A lot. Throughout the 1980s, the internet was mostly used by researchers and universities like ours, and a lot of government labs. And they shared a lot of information in a bunch of different ways. There was things like LISTSERV, which was an early email-based discussion group system, and Telnet, which was a way to remotely access another computer over the internet. And Usenet, you can think of that like an early form of an online discussion forum. So kind of think of it like an early form of social media. And there were other things like Gopher was on the internet. It was a menu-based system that allowed browsers to access files on different computers, all connected to the internet. And FTP, which is short for File Transfer Protocol, let users upload and download files between computers on the internet. And we'll actually be using FTP in this course to move the web files that you create on your laptop up to our class web server so others, and I, can view them in a web browser. And all of these tools were useful, but they weren't integrated. Information was still scattered all over the internet, and systems didn't work together very well. Because if you wanted to find a document, you had to know exactly where to look and on what system it was on and which tool you needed to use to access it. And that was a problem that someone by the name of Tim Berners-Lee would eventually try to solve.